I stood by the floor-to-ceiling window of my apartment, the city lights twinkling like a distant constellation, and smoothed the silk of my cream blouse, almost nervously, though I hated admitting it. My phone buzzed again, insistent, relentless, pulling me back into the world I'd built carefully around myself. A message from them. The very people who had once turned me away, scoffing at my ambitions, as if I were chasing clouds. My parents, my sister, even a few old friends, they had all refused my invitation to celebrate my promotion, to witness the milestone I had achieved on my own. And now, by some twist of fate, they couldn't enter without me. I traced my fingers along the edge of the marble countertop, tasting the irony like bittersweet chocolate. They had dismissed me once, left me to figure things out alone, and yet here I was, waiting calmly in my office that overlooked the skyline I had claimed piece by piece. A faint smell of fresh coffee wafted from the corner of the room where I had set my mug. I inhaled slowly, grounding myself, reminding myself of every late night, every whispered doubt, every hard-fought step that had brought me here. I could almost hear my grandmother's words echoing. Never forget your worth, even when no one else does. And now, the moment of reckoning had arrived. I heard the elevator ding below, my past standing at my door. I remember the sting like it was yesterday. I was 22, fresh out of college, bright-eyed, and full of ideas I believed in fiercely. I had called my parents, excited, to tell them about a startup opportunity one had been offered, a small but promising project that could change my life. "I don't know, Harper," my father had said, his voice clipped, almost dismissive. "It sounds risky. Maybe you should think more realistically." My mother had chimed in, echoing the same doubt. My older brother, always the practical one, rolled his eyes. "Honestly, Harper, you're dreaming too big. Why don't you just get a stable job like everyone else?" I could feel my hands shaking as I gripped the edge of the kitchen counter, trying to swallow the lump in my throat. My dreams weren't clouds, they were plans, strategies, small, actionable steps I had already started. But no one seemed to see it. The sting of rejection cut deeper because it wasn't just skepticism, it was dismissal, a quiet but sharp way of saying, "You're not enough, not now, maybe never." I left the room, clutching a small notebook my grandmother had given me years earlier. "Write everything down, Harper," she had said, her eyes soft but determined. "The world may not listen now, but one day it will. And when it does, you'll be ready." That night, I sat on my tiny studio apartment floor, scribbling furiously in that notebook, letting the hurt flow out of me, transforming it into plans. Every rejection, every skeptical glance, became fuel. I mapped out strategies, studied successful women in business, taught myself marketing, finance, negotiation, skills I had been told I didn't need, wouldn't succeed in. By the time I fell asleep, exhausted but determined, I had made a silent promise. I would rise. And when I did, it wouldn't just be to prove them wrong. It would be for myself. That night marked the first real step toward independence, a quiet but unshakable foundation that no one, not even the people who had refused to support me, could touch. I didn't tell anyone, not my parents, not my former friends, not even my brother, how quickly I started building a life that belonged only to me. That small notebook my grandmother had given me became my Bible, each page filled with strategies, lessons, and tiny victories. The first real breakthrough came when I met Claire Donovan, a seasoned entrepreneur who saw potential in me I hadn't yet fully recognized. She had a sharp eye, a warm smile, and a no-nonsense attitude. "You're trying to prove them wrong," she said during our first meeting, "but Harper, you need to prove it to yourself first." "Let's do that." Under her mentorship, I learned to navigate the business world with grit and intelligence. I spent long nights hunched over my laptop, learning financial modeling, pitching to clients who dismissed me at first, then slowly, one by one, starting to take me seriously. There were nights I cried silently at my desk, exhausted, wondering if I was pushing too hard, if my ambitions were too big. But every morning, I reminded myself of that promise I had whispered in the dark years ago. I will rise. The first major client came almost unexpectedly, a local boutique looking for marketing expertise. I poured my heart into the project, working evenings and weekends, and when the launch succeeded, the recognition I received was intoxicating. From there, everything built on itself. The second client, the third, the small victories stacking quietly, forming the architecture of a life I didn't need anyone else to validate. By the time I moved into my penthouse office downtown, I had transformed not just my career, but my sense of self. The financial independence was thrilling, yes, but the emotional independence, the quiet certainty that no one could undermine me, was the real victory. I posted modest social media updates, always careful not to draw attention to the full extent of my achievements. Let them think I was still the struggling girl they had underestimated. Let them believe they had a chance to catch up. All the while, I kept the small notebook hidden in a drawer, a secret talisman of the journey from rejection to resilience. It reminded me that the power had always been mine. It just took courage, patience, and relentless persistence to fully claim it. And now, standing in my office overlooking the skyline, I felt a surge of quiet satisfaction. The stage was set for the confrontation I had imagined countless times, and this time, I would control every line, every moment, every reaction. The elevator doors opened, and I heard the soft shuffle of footsteps in the marble-floored lobby. My chest didn't race, my heart was steady, my mind sharp. I knew exactly what I was about to do. They walked in, my parents, my brother, and a few old friends who had once dismissed my ambitions. Their faces were a mixture of curiosity, expectation, and, if I was honest, faint pity. They assumed they were entering the life of a struggling woman, someone who had tried and failed. I stepped out from behind my desk, letting the sound of my heels echo softly in the office, letting them take in the surroundings before I spoke. The space was sleek, modern, yet undeniably personal. Walls adorned with contemporary art I had invested in, awards carefully framed, shelves filled with the books I had read in those long, lonely nights of preparation. The scent of fresh flowers mingled with the faint aroma of espresso from the corner machine. A soft rug, warm lighting, and the hum of the city below. Every detail told a story of someone who had carved her own path. "Welcome," I said, my voice calm, measured, confident. "I'm glad you could finally make it." They froze. My mother's lips parted slightly, my father's brow furrowed, and my brother, usually so quick to smirk, was silent. Their eyes roamed the office, the awards, the art, the subtle but unmistakable signs of success. I waited, long enough for the silence to stretch, for the realization to settle in. Then I spoke again, softer this time, letting the weight of each word land. "I own this company. I've led projects that brought in millions in revenue. I've built a life I didn't need anyone else to approve. And every time you doubted me, I turned that doubt into fuel. That's why you're here now. You can't enter this life without me." Shock. Disbelief. The quick intake of breath from my mother. My father's face paled slightly, and my brother's jaw tightened. They had expected a girl who had struggled, who had begged for support, who had perhaps failed quietly and now needed them. Instead, they met a woman who had risen so completely that their presence here was almost irrelevant, but necessary if they wanted to witness the truth. For a moment, I watched them absorb it. Their expressions flickered between shame, awe, and something that resembled regret. But I wasn't there to punish. I was there to claim my power, quietly, decisively, and unapologetically. I gestured toward the shelves, toward the awards. Everything you see here, every milestone, every success, was built from the ground up alone. You refused my invite then, but now, I smiled, letting a hint of irony slip through. You can't step into this life without me. I leaned against my desk, watching them struggle with the reality they had ignored for so long. The power had shifted. I wasn't the girl they once dismissed. I was the woman they needed to acknowledge on my terms. "I'm willing to let you be part of my life," I said, calm but firm. "But things will be different now. You can't return to old patterns, expecting me to bend or forgive without effort. There are conditions." My mother looked startled. My father frowned. My brother shifted uneasily. Good. They needed to feel the weight of accountability. First, I continued, if you want a relationship with me, you must respect my independence. That means no unsolicited advice, no judgment of my choices. You can offer support, but only when asked. They nodded slowly, uncertain, yet curious. Second, I said, turning to my brother, you need to pursue something meaningful on your own. Stop trying to live in my shadow or measure your success by mine. I want to see you challenge yourself, not compare yourself to me. He swallowed, visibly uncomfortable, but I didn't back down. Third, I addressed my parents. Stop clinging to old expectations. You taught me caution, yes, but you also taught me doubt. I need you to let go of that when it comes to me. Focus on your growth, your dreams, your passions. I paused, letting each condition sink in. My voice softened slightly, carrying the warmth of someone who still cared deeply, but would no longer tolerate toxicity. If you can honor these conditions, then we can rebuild a relationship, stronger, healthier, and rooted in respect. There was a long silence, punctuated only by the quiet hum of the office lights. I could see the internal struggle in their eyes, the realization that nothing would be the same and that they would have to earn their place in my life. Finally, my mother nodded, a faint tear glimmering. We understand, Harper. We're willing to try. My father exhaled slowly, the tension leaving his shoulders. My brother gave a hesitant smile, and I felt a spark of hope ignite. They were beginning to see the power of transformation, not just mine, but theirs as well. I leaned back, the city lights casting long shadows across the room. The journey had been long, painful, and sometimes lonely, but in this moment, I understood the true meaning of power. Not control over others, but control over yourself, and the ability to lift others up only when they were ready to rise. Weeks passed, and slowly, subtly, I noticed the changes. My mother signed up for that painting class she had always dreamed about, letting her creativity bloom instead of worrying about my life choices. My father began volunteering at the community center, investing his energy in something that mattered to him rather than controlling me. My brother launched his own small business, taking the first real steps toward independence without waiting for my approval. It wasn't perfection. Old habits crept in from time to time, but the effort, the willingness to grow, was enough. And for me, that was all I had ever wanted. Not obedience or admiration, but respect and shared growth. I sat at my desk one evening, the soft glow of my office lamps reflecting off the glass awards and art that chronicled my journey. My fingers traced the spine of the old notebook my grandmother had given me. Every page told a story of resilience, of late nights, of doubts turned into victories. That little gift had carried me through every storm, and now it sat quietly beside me, a symbol of both where I had been and where I had chosen to go. A soft breeze from the open window brought the scent of the city inside, mingling with a faint aroma of coffee I had brewed hours ago. I smiled, thinking of all the moments, big and small, that had led me here. I realized that the true measure of success wasn't in wealth, recognition, or even influence. It was in how fully I had claimed myself, in the life I had built and the boundaries I had established. I looked out over the skyline one last time, letting the hum of the city settle in my bones. And as I reflected on the journey, the rejection, the solitude, the hard-won victories, I spoke softly, almost to myself, but with a voice that could fill any room. I rise on my own terms, and those who once refused to believe in me now cannot enter my life without me. It was a line that carried the weight of every struggle, every tear, every triumph. A declaration of strength, independence, and grace. And in that moment I knew I had not just survived. I had flourished.